Alright, I am back with a video, not about any specific game this time. I'm taking a little break from talking about Destiny and Outriders to talk about something more console specific, kind of based on an article I wrote earlier today. The past couple weeks or so, I've found myself once again embroiled in the good old console wars, and just because of a couple opinion pieces I wrote, namely ahead of the Outriders launch, how I was going to be switching from PS5 to Xbox Series X, and I would likely do that for most third-party games going forward because of many large and small, mostly small annoyances I have with my PS5, and some things that Xbox is doing right between Game Pass and some of the more kind of things I view as player-friendly additions to the game. That's been going okay. There have been some Xbox-specific issues with Outriders. I think most of those are patched now. They just patched the inventory crash bug, which was bad for a while. Everyone's still kind of getting their gear wipes, but they may have just patched that too. I'm not sure right when I'm recording this, but we'll see. I wanted to talk about like kind of this overall narrative that Xbox is like surging and like winning the console war, and like this it's kind of a constant refrain that came up, even though that's not really what I've ever been explicitly stating. I just think Xbox is doing a lot of things right, but I think we have to pull back and look at the larger context of the current state of the console race. I think I understand pretty clearly why Xbox is getting all this praise right now, and it's because they keep producing these incredibly splashy headlines, news stories that you can't help but cover because they're so just massive. And for a while, it was Xbox buying this studio or that studio, either people they worked for before or kind of newer names that are going to go on to make first-party games for them as they try and rectify their biggest weakness against Sony, which is a lack of must-have first-party games outside of a few select series. And then they dropped the bomb that was buying Bethesda outright, and that was a $7.5 billion purchase, which gets them the entire Bethesda catalog. ZeniMax, same thing essentially. And so that meant a ton of, Bethesda games on Game Pass, but it also probably means future games like Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6 will be on Xbox. Maybe not Xbox exclusively, but because nothing is truly Xbox exclusive in this age when all their first-party things also come to PC, and when Game Pass and xCloud kind of run everywhere, but in short, not on PlayStation, and obviously not on Nintendo, because Nintendo can't run these games anyway, so it's kind of a moot point. And then outside of that, they've been doing kind of just big moves with Game Pass. Subscriptions to Game Pass have been surging over the course of the pandemic, and they have done a lot of big third-party deals too, in addition to their first-party stuff, where Destiny 2 Beyond Light launched on Game Pass. Outriders, with just a few weeks to launch, announced it was launching on Game Pass. And then the biggest story was whatever the hell they did to get MLB The Show 21 on Game Pass. What appears to have happened is they just did a deal straight with MLB, where not only we already knew the game was coming to both platforms, but it was also, they did an extra deal where it was going to be day one on Game Pass, whereas the show is $70 on PlayStation. And this is a game that is made by Sony. It's made by a Sony first-party studio. So that's pretty crazy. However, I think we are maybe overstating Xbox's strength a bit, just because, these headlines are big deals and they are very splashy, but either the ramifications of everything that's going on won't really surface for a number of years, or it may not surface at all. Meanwhile, Sony, I do agree that Sony has seemed kind of complacent. We just don't really hear anything from them, not nearly at the level with Microsoft and all these breaking stories about them. So they just are kind of content to exist, and I have been annoyed by many specific things about my PS5. I do not like adaptive triggers. I do not like patch copying that made it to a new generation. I do not like the UI redesign. I do not like a good number of things, the friend party system, like the list goes on and on. So these minor annoyances have caused me to migrate to Xbox in cases where I have the same game on both platforms. This is not me, throwing my PS5, in the trash or something. Like, I still play Destiny there. All my friends are there. I will still play every exclusive they release for the most part. And I will still be playing, a ton of PlayStation. But in a situation where I have both consoles, it just makes more sense to play on Xbox. that's just me. The grander scale of this is that Sony has developed a tremendous amount of goodwill after the PS4 generation, especially, and created, a ton of loyal consumers. PS4 sold, I think, 110 million units by last count, and a lot of those are just going to straight carry over into PS5 purchases at some point. And PS5 is the fastest launching or fastest selling console in history, and it would be so to an even greater extent if everyone who wanted one could actually buy one, but they are hard supply limited. And Xbox is selling out too, that's true, but Sony is selling out to a greater extent, and they are moving more units. And if Microsoft was beating them in terms of kind of volume sales, I think they would be announcing that. Microsoft so far is sticking to their plan from a few years ago of just pretty much never announcing Xbox sales again, and they only talk about things like Game Pass subscription numbers. So that's where their focus is now, clearly. And Sony is in this position because they might appear to be aloof and like not really listening to gamers and whatever the terms are you want to use, but like this is kind of a why change what's working situation. I think everyone has rightful confidence in Sony at this point that the system launched. It's not anything maybe crazy revolutionary. It's a more powerful PlayStation. I think it went backward in a few minor ways, but it's not a huge deal. And so everybody wants one. And everyone has confidence that the games that come out for PlayStation that are first-party exclusives are going to be the kind of must-haves that we saw over the course of the entire PS4 generation in particular, where pretty much every year, they were releasing something that was probably a Game of the Year contender to some degree, whether you want to think that's God of War or The Last of Us 2 or Ghost of Tsushima or Spider-Man or Bloodborne, or the list goes on and on. And that is carried over to right now, where all of those games are getting sequels, essentially. Naughty Dog, I don't know what they're working on now. There's all these different rumors about remasters and stuff, but it seems like they're probably going to make Uncharted 5 without Nathan Drake and just kind of keep doing that series, probably make a new Last of Us at some point. But all those successful games are going to get sequels. It stands to reason they will be pretty good because, past blockbuster sequels from Sony have also been good. So, every 6 months to a year, it seems like there's going to be some, only on PlayStation game that you have to have. Microsoft may be making the right moves, but it's a little harder to have complete faith in them. We have stuff that's more near term that we already know about, like Halo Infinite. Halo's been a series that, they've always been making games for, but it's been 343, not Bungie, and Halo Infinite was already delayed a full year, and they had to bring on new kind of leads of both multiplayer and the campaign for this year to kind of get the game out the door. And, well, I certainly hope that it's good. I mean, it's very clear that this game has totally been through the ringer, and if I would definitely have worried about the state it was going to launch in after that preview, which is why I think they delayed it. But now, an extra year seems like a lot in game time, but it depends how much they have to redevelop and what they have to do and what the final product looks like. Past that, they have done great work buying smaller studios to cultivate. But Sony did that too, where they all these studios that are making Insomniac, Sucker Punch, they all started pretty small and eventually kind of grew up into these blockbuster producers. But that took what, 10, 15, 20 years in some cases of cultivation. So that is not really an instant thing. So these kind of smaller studios that Microsoft bought, they might make good games. They may be on a smaller scale at first, but it may take some time for them to kind of grow the way Sony has grown its studios. Other games are managing big projects. They have that big super studio they made that I think is making the perfect dark game. This is kind of the whole, you don't want to find yourself in an Amazon or Google situation where you think you have all the components. You've hired talented people that have made good games before. You give them $1 zillion and then you're like, okay, make a great video game. And so far, that has not really worked out for Amazon or Google. Google actually dismantled its first-party game studio that was, I think it was led by Jade Raymond, and then she's immediately doing something else somewhere else. And Amazon is still trying to make games. Their most promising one is New World, but all their other games have essentially failed or been canceled. So that's not going great. I hope that does not happen with Microsoft and its super studio, but it's not. The point is, it's not a guarantee, and we're dealing with kind of unknown quantities here, like a newly assembled studio Perfect Dark is a fine IP, but it's been a bazillion years since we last visited it, so I don't know what its return will be like. And then we have Bethesda, and Bethesda is kind of more of a sure thing, where we know Bethesda can make great games, and we assume that future Bethesda games will kind of continue that tradition. Their biggest games, however, their biggest upcoming games are from Bethesda proper are Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6. These games are very far away. Starfield does not even have a release year yet. It is just kind of, it doesn't have a true concept to it. Like, we know it's kind of like a space RPG, but that is all we know about it. There have been, again, maybe rightly, maybe you don't want to show a game off too early in this cyberpunk era, but we have no idea when that's coming, so that does seem like that is at least a couple of years away. And then we know Bethesda said outright that Elder Scrolls is their next game after that, which is why all we have from Elder Scrolls 6 is the title card. So even if Elder Scrolls 6 is Xbox exclusive and it's as heralded as Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim, that is still a game that could maybe not be out for 4, 5, 6 years. So we are talking like the long term here, and these investments are kind of for the long haul, rather than Sony has already set up this chain of 4, 5, 6 talented studios producing really good games at a pretty regular interval now. And like, COVID may have disrupted everyone's plans for at least this next year and last year a bit, but generally speaking, like, they seem to be on a more kind of regimented schedule where, like, okay, we know Forbidden West is coming this fall. I guess it could be delayed, but who knows? And then God of War, they said 2021. No one ever believed that. So that's probably 2022. But the Microsoft kind of mega games, I read some article today that was also talking about how things like, what's it called? Perfect Dark and the other kind of cartoony one they're making, I forget what it's called, but like, those are also still years away. And so these are not really imminent things. So the most imminent thing is Halo Infinite, which, that could be amazing, but I don't know if anyone has like full faith in what that game's going to be. And Sony really just kind of has not that much to worry about in general. Like, they have such a strong position at this point. I mean, after, generations of PlayStation, but also after last generation specifically, when the PS4 was so popular. And we have seen no signs that, like, Microsoft's increased appeal with Game Pass or potential first-party games has dented, the sales of the PS5 at all. The worst thing that I think could happen is maybe Sony has to relent on this idea that PS5 games all have to be $70. Maybe that's something they scale back. Maybe they have to offer more stuff on PS Now to better compete with Game Pass to a certain extent. I still do not expect them to start, like, dumping a ton of stuff onto PS Now, including day one exclusive releases, because they want God of War 2 to move 10 million box copies. Like, they don't want to give that up. And they've said that outright, that they don't think it would be cost effective to do that. And we don't really know the economics of, Microsoft funding itself with Game Pass. And like, they are likely taking a pretty big hit for at least a while to kind of secure all these deals, to get all these exclusives. And like, this is kind of related, where we just learned from the Epic Games Store that they've been losing several $100 million a year the past 2 years. And that is because they've been trying to secure all these kind of exclusive deals for themselves, which cost tens and tens of millions of dollars a piece. And so it stands to reason that, we see all these exclusive deals happening with Microsoft, and they are also paying that. And if Game Pass subscribers get high enough, like in Game Pass Ultimate in particular, maybe that pays for itself. But you also look at something like Netflix, which spends hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars on content, and it is like kind of permanently in debt and like taking on tons of debt to produce this. And yet, like, it's Netflix. It's like the biggest entertainment company in the world, essentially. So it's worth the cost. So if Microsoft can get there, that'll be fine. But I wouldn't expect Sony to necessarily kind of jump off this cliff with them, because they don't need to. And like, if it happens where all of a sudden their first party game sales are way down and Game Pass has 80 million subscribers and, it's just going crazy, that's another thing, but that has not really happened yet. And even with Game Pass increases, like, I don't know if that's enough to motivate Sony to make any like crazily drastic moves in terms of launching all the first party games there, or, this and that. So, or doing these big third party deals for themselves. And that I don't know. I don't know if I want to see that, and like splitting. It's not like content or platform exclusive content, but it's like, okay, well, you have Outriders that's launching here, and like we're gonna launch this game on now for free, and like that's a whole other kind of war that will be a little odd if that starts happening. But again, like I don't know if Sony, Sony's a huge company, but Microsoft is like one of the hugest companies on planet Earth, so it's a little bit of a difference in scale, and I don't know if Sony wants to, pay the kinds of money that Microsoft is to these third-party companies to make deals like this. I also expect Microsoft to keep buying things. Like the long running rumor is that they are going to buy a Japanese games company. That could be any number of companies because there's so many. And they could probably get some of them for less than they paid for Bethesda. And there's rumors that they're going to produce Kojima's next game. Who knows? So I would expect kind of this pattern to continue where Microsoft keeps, debuting these crazy big blockbuster announcements, like this crazy game's coming to Game Pass, or like they're buying this studio for $5 billion. Like that will probably keep happening. And Sony will keep selling tens and tens of millions of PS5s as fast as they can make them. And they will probably be releasing games that are hugely acclaimed in whatever year they come out in and that everybody wants to play. And that's kind of the basics of all you need to be a success. And even if you're not making, these headlines or assembling Game Pass, like maybe that does hurt them in the long term. Maybe if everything moves to a Game Pass model, they will be really far behind in the future because Microsoft is essentially the only one doing this, with Stadia borderline shutting down almost. That's what it seems like. And then Amazon has their own thing that is not launched yet, and their whole game division is kind of a mess. But we don't know that yet, and it's too early. And for all this very stupid like death of the console talk, like that has never actually happened, and they're releasing new consoles that are selling better than any console in the history of time to this day. So it's it's hardly kind of an urgent situation for them, and I do think they shouldn't get complacent, and I think they should fix what is wrong with the PS5 in many degrees, even if it's just nitpicky things. But I also don't think the narrative is actually like Microsoft may be having a comeback and they may be, making very big moves that it's nice to see. And yet like Sony is just such a behemoth in this market that them even doing nothing, it might be like, flying a plane into a mountain or something. Like they're kind of immovable with how established they are and how unlikely it is they're going to like totally drop the ball on something. Like their next, coveted 5 exclusives are all going to be terrible or something. So they seem veering like they could be making dumb decisions like that. Like I would consider $70 PS5 games very dumb. And then Microsoft is making them look kind of foolish with things like the MLB deal. But like that's good for memes and like, Twitter fights and stuff. But in practice, like I have yet to see any kind of real impact on Sony's dominance in the market. I think everyone benefits when there's more competition, and I think Microsoft is certainly going to be more competitive. It's just that it may take a very, very long time for the investments they made now for that to kind of come into fruition. So we probably keep going, but it's almost a 20-minute video, so I should probably call it a day. But those are my thoughts on kind of the console war stuff. I know everyone has their opinions about this, and these are controversial topics to say the least, but it's just something I wanted to discuss here in lieu of my usual looters. So thanks for watching. I'm surprised Evie didn't run here. I don't know where she is, but I'll try to wrangle her for my next video here. But all right, I'll see you guys soon. Take care.